The Jets are in Green Bay on Sunday for a game against the Packers. What do they need to do to get their third straight win? We'll discuss today on the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Friday, October 14th, 2022, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com, thanking you for making this show your first listen or first watch every day. This podcast is free, and it's available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening. You'll never miss an episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps the podcast out, and it helps other Jets fans find Locked On Jets. Well, the Jets are in Green Bay on Sunday. 1 o'clock Eastern is the scheduled kickoff time. They will face the Green Bay Packers. The first time they've been in Green Bay in 8 years. That's how it works. You play on the road at every NFC venue once every 8 years. I guess there are now some exceptions with the 17th game, but for the most part, that remains in place. That game 8 years ago was really ugly. Jets jumped out to a 21-3 lead on Aaron Rodgers. Geno Smith was playing great for the Jets. Topical based on what's happening in the NFL this year. Geno Smith got off to a great start in that game. The Packers came back to win it. Muhammad Wilkerson got kicked out of the game. Late in the game, the Jets converted on a key fourth down, but offensive coordinator Marty Mornhinweg called a timeout before the snap because there was something about the look he did not like. I mean, it was a tough loss for the Jets, so hopefully they'll do a little bit better this time. And on today's show, we're going to preview this game. It's a game that looks very different from how we thought it would look at the beginning of the season. You have to remember, the Packers are a team that has been the number one seed in the NFC the last 2 seasons. And the year before, they went to the NFC Championship game. They were the number 2 seed. So this has been a top 2 team in the NFC 3 straight years. And I don't need to tell you, things have not gone so well for the Jets the last couple of years. So I think even the most diehard Jets fan, when the schedule came out, probably was looking at this game saying, well, they don't really have much of a chance in this one. But as I always say, that's why you can't pre-assess the schedule. You never know how the season's going to turn out. Heading into this game, the Jets are at 3-2. They're looking pretty good. They've won 2 in a row. The Packers, they're struggling. They're coming off a really bad loss to the Giants. Their offense is not clicking on all cylinders. It's a team with issues. Peter Bukowski yesterday on our crossover show said that, it sounds like there are some internal issues with Green Bay. And of course, these things could go one of 2 ways. You're always 1 week away from figuring things out in the NFL. And if you're going well, you're 1 week away from maybe things kind of taking a step back. That's the way this league works. You're never as bad as you look at your best, and you're never as bad as you look at your worst. At least when Adam Gase is not your coach. So an interesting game for the Jets here. A game that on paper looks winnable. Packers enter this game, according to the folks at BetOnline, about a touchdown favorite. Not a surprise the Packers are favored at home, but I think a lot of that is based on preseason expectations for these teams. Because if you look at the way these teams have actually performed, I don't think a touchdown spread is really fair or accurate. Of course, it's always possible Green Bay could win this game by a touchdown or more, but I think if you're looking at this objectively based on the way the teams have actually performed, if you take out your preconceptions of the teams, maybe Green Bay should be favored at home, but 7 points feels like a big spread. Now for the Jets, I think this is I don't want to say it's a huge game, but I think this game has a lot of significance because in an AFC that has a couple of teams that look really good, but a lot of mediocrity, a win here gets the Jets to 4-2. And while it's true, you always want to finish the season strong. I talk about it all the time. You want your team playing its best football at the end of the season. You want to feel like your team's improving throughout the season, and that's true. Sometimes we forget a win in October counts for just as much as a win in December. And if the Jets get to 4-2, well, let's think about this. All they really have to do the rest of the way at 4-2 is go 6-5 through the last 11 games, and suddenly they're at 10 wins. So just if the Jets get this victory, if they're able to bank this victory, they have to play, just over 500 football the rest of the way to get to 10 wins. And if they do that, they're probably going to the playoffs. No guarantees, but they probably are. So, and I'm getting ahead of myself here because I don't think, I'm not sure the Jets are a playoff team this year, but it shows you the significance because there are not many great, there are a couple great teams, and a couple of them, probably be playing Sunday in Kansas City, Buffalo and the Chiefs, but there are not that many great teams in the AFC. And, in a conference where there's a lot of, teams close to average, sometimes it's just about who banks the most wins. Sometimes it's about, who plays the best, who gets hot at the right time. Jets have a shot here. And beyond that, I think that this is a game that's going to tell us a lot about this Jets team because the Jets have not dealt with a lot of prosperity in recent years. And it's one thing to sneak up on teams. It's another when you got a couple wins going. Are you going to be overconfident? Are you going to continue to have your focus? Are you reading your press clippings? Because right now things are going pretty well for the Jets. I think this will show us, if the Jets go out there and get blown out this weekend, I think it'll be disappointing because it'll show that maybe they lost their focus a little bit. Maybe they're not, maybe they got a little too big after a couple of wins. A 3-game winning streak would be a huge deal right now, but you have to maintain your focus. And part of this is going to be based on what happens on the other side. We know the Packers are not playing well going into this game. So I think when the schedule came, and Peter, again, on our crossover yesterday, Peter Bukowski, my friend, the host of Locked On Packers, said that a couple weeks back, the Packers and their fans were looking at this stretch where they had the Giants, they had the Jets, they have another easy game ahead on paper. They were looking at this as their get-right stretch. Well, it didn't go so well for them last week against the Giants. This week they have the Jets. Jets are looking a little bit tougher than maybe the Packers thought they would look at this point of the season. Part of it is how well will the Packers play, and as Peter talked about yesterday, it seems like there's a little bit of there are a few internal issues with Green Bay. So I think there's an open question about how the Packers are going to respond. Every year you see a team that's expected to be really good. And I said this, now I shouldn't say this because I said this is exactly what I said before the game against the Bengals, and the Bengals seemed like they figured everything out in the game when they played the Jets. But every year there's a team or two that you're expecting to be really good, and things just fall apart. And this is the time of year, this point in October, this could be a turning point. And if things start to go bad for the Packers, how will they respond? Is this a game that could easily be the game that kind of just turns them around and gets them rolling again and sends them back on the path towards winning the NFC North and going to the playoffs? But it also could be the type of game where you look back as a turning point and say, if the Jets beat the Green Bay, this is a point where maybe this was the sign where things were not going to go our way this season. And if the Jets get up early, and this was one of the keys, I think, against Cincinnati, the Jets did not get up early. The Jets fell behind early, and the Bengals kind of felt like they got their legs under them and were able to move forward. And I think, whenever you're playing a team that's struggling, the early stage of the game is important because if you get a lead on that team, maybe doubt starts to seep in, maybe frustration starts to mount. Meanwhile, if the other team gets the lead on you, the struggling team you're playing gets the lead on you, it's a different story. Then suddenly they start to have confidence. They start to feel like, okay, maybe we figured things out. So lots of interesting elements in this game. Of course, all eyes are going to be on the Jets offense, Zach Wilson, Breece Hall. And ahead here on this Friday game preview, we'll talk about some of the key things to watch when the Jets have the football. Of course, if you've been following the Jets this season, they've had a lot of injuries on the offensive line. It's felt like they've needed to post a listing on LinkedIn Jobs. And you should know that these days, every potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. And you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. Then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. This show's free and it's available on all platforms. We're previewing Sunday's game between the Jets and the Packers, 1 o'clock Eastern Time kickoff in Lambeau Field. Jets have a chance to go 4-2. It would be the first time they've been 2 games over 500 since the 2015 season, so something we've been waiting for quite a while. It's going to require another solid offensive performance. I don't think the Jets need to go for 40 to win this game. I hope the Jets don't need to go for 40 to win this game like they did last week against Miami. But you still want to see a quality offensive performance. Last week, I think the Jets kind of found the formula. Heading into the season, I think that this team was going to be counting on quality play on the offensive line. I don't think we imagined that this would be the mix, though. And this was a couple of injuries ago that the Jets, with their initial offensive line alignment, felt like they had a strength. This was before Dwayne Brown was in at left tackle. It was when Elijah Vera Tucker was a guard. Elijah Vera Tucker's been one of the stories for the Jets this season. I was impressed by his play the first couple of weeks when he was at the right guard position. I was surprised that they moved him out to tackle, and I'm surprised he's held up so well at tackle. I figured he could, do okay. I was not expecting him to play as well as he has the last 2 weeks. And I think it's a situation where you stick with this offensive line group until they give you a reason to not stick with them. They've been really solid so far. And on the offensive line, continuity is important. Typically, the way it works with the line is the more these guys play together, the better they get, because you know what the guy next to you is going to do in any situation. If there's a stunt, if there's a blitz you're not expecting, you figure out how to work together, how to pick things up, how to pass guys off. It's an important thing. And that's one of the other things that was impressive last week, because I thought the line played well against Miami. It was kind of a makeshift line. It wasn't a line that that really worked together at all, and you have Vera Tucker moving around to a new position every week. Maybe the Jets can get a little continuity on this offensive line, because there have been so many different versions of this Jets offensive line in the first 5 weeks. It should be nice to have a group that's working together. But, a difficult assignment, because the Packers do have some good pass rushers, Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary. I mean, they have more than that. So a good test. Last week against Miami presented its own challenges because they like to bring kind of exotic blitzes. They like to bring guys from the secondary as blitzers. But, I'm not sure Miami has a ton of general pass rush talent. This week, the Jets will be tested. And this will be a good test for Vera Tucker. It'll be a good test for this new look line. And it'll be a test for Breece Hall. And I think that last week, the formula really kind of emerged. It's taken some time for Breece Hall to get comfortable, but you've seen him improve every single week. I felt like he would eventually take over this offense, and maybe last week was the week it happened. The Pittsburgh game, you kind of saw signs it was coming, especially, and I keep going back to this, when the game was on the line, they gave the ball to Breece Hall against the Steelers. And to me, that speaks volumes about how the Jets view Breece Hall, especially because you have a quality back in Michael Carter, who's still on the team, who's proven with this team. But last week, the assortment, and part of it was game situation. The Jets ran the ball more than they passed it. And I think that's what Mike LaFleur wants to do, because I think the Jets want to protect Zach Wilson. I don't think the Jets want to put too much on Zach Wilson's plate. There will be games like Pittsburgh where Zach Wilson has to go out and win it for the Jets. I think the Jets want that to be the exception rather than the rule, though. I think whenever you're bringing along a young quarterback, unless he's a truly special prospect, it's just a lot to ask a young quarterback to do it all. And Breece Hall is the type of player who could be Zach Wilson's best friend, because on a first down play, he can rip off a nice game. He can get you 5-6 yards, get you in 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4, and that makes life easier for a young quarterback like Zach Wilson, because now you're not in a position where you're behind the sticks, where the defense can get after you, where they don't have to worry about the run. Pass rushers can just fire upfield off the ball. So from that standpoint, it's easy. And you need a certain number of quality plays to win a game. it's much easier for a quarterback, instead of having to scan the entire field, to just be able to hand the ball to a running back and let the running back make a play. That makes life easy on a young quarterback. But it's also easier because of what Breece Hall could do in the passing game, which we saw last week, where he had a couple of long runs after catches. And Breece has had some issues with some drops this year. He's among the league leaders in drops, actually. But if you're Zach Wilson, first of all, you add the screen game where, and even though neither of the big plays last week were in the screen game, a guy who could run the ball like Breece Hall, if you get the ball into his hands in space, there's potential for a big play. But beyond that, if you aren't sure what the defense is giving you, if the defense throws something you're not expecting, life's much easier when you have a check down target at the running back position where you can just throw in the ball and have reasonable confidence that he's going to go make a play. A young running back like Breece Hall can be a best friend for a young quarterback like Zach Wilson. And it goes back to what I'm saying about making Zach Wilson's life as easy as possible. Last week Zach Wilson played pretty well, I thought, but he did miss some throws. You did not really care about that at the end of the game, though, because the Jets had the supporting cast around Zach Wilson to be able to work around his bad throws, and the Jets were able to have good feelings. Zach's able to build confidence from the things he did do well in that game. And, you want to continue to see Zach play solid football. Through the first 2 weeks, I think Zach Wilson has looked like a league average quarterback. And what did I say all offseason if you were listening? The goal this year for Zach Wilson, as far as I'm concerned, is to look like a league average quarterback. And, if he does that, then in the future we can talk about bigger goals. We can talk about improving from there. But you want Zach Wilson to look like he belongs. You want him to avoid bad mistakes. You want him to avoid really shaky decisions. You want him to get the ball where it needs to go. And for the most part, the first 2 games of the season he's played, Zach Wilson has done that. So you want to see that continue to happen. Zach Wilson doesn't need to go out and throw for 300 yards. He doesn't need to go out and throw for 400 yards. He doesn't need 4 touchdowns. He just needs to go out and play competent football. That's the position the Jets want to put Zach Wilson in. I think Breece Hall, if this offensive line plays well, it makes life easier around Zach Wilson. It makes it more likely you're going to see what you're looking for from this Jets offense and from this young quarterback. Now, ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to close out the show. We'll talk about what we need to see from the Jets on the defensive side of the ball. Can they stop Aaron Rodgers? That's what we'll discuss as we continue this Friday podcast. As I mentioned earlier, the Jets are touchdown underdogs on the road at Lambeau Field. It's tough to justify that based on what we've seen from these teams this season. Now, of course, there are other things, people are prognosticating the talent levels on the teams. The Packers playing at home is obviously a factor. And, of course, you never know. I mean, Green Bay could win this game. Still, 7 points does seem like a lot based on what we know about these teams. So if you're a believer that the Jets can win this game and want to make some money, you should know that BetOnline.net is your #1 source for football betting info this season. You can find their latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all the sports wagering information, with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including the NFL, but also including the baseball playoffs, the NHL, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Friday, talking about Jets-Packers this Sunday in Lambeau Field. An interesting game because these are coaching staffs who know each other very well. Matt LaFleur, Robert Saleh, Packers head coach, Jets head coach, they were in each other's weddings. And Matt LaFleur, that name may sound familiar. He's the brother of Mike LaFleur, the Jets offensive coordinator. So lots of ties between these two coaching staffs. And last year, the Jets and Packers actually had a joint practice. I think it was a sign of the quality of the relationship the two coaching staffs had. It was a bad joint practice because Carl Lawson got hurt in that game. Carl Lawson's playing well. Carl Lawson last week had a big game against the Miami Dolphins. Carl Lawson's gotten a lot of criticism, but if you look at the season he's having, I think he's playing well. He's getting to the quarterback. He's got 2.5 sacks through the first 5 games. I think it's tough to complain about the job Carl Lawson's doing, but Carl Lawson's not the best Jet on the defensive line. Quinnen Williams, I don't think we talk enough about the year Quinnen Williams is having. He's the best player on the team right now. He's dominating up front, winning his assignments. He's starting to put up some stats. And next to Quinnen Williams, Sheldon Rankins is, actually performing the way I was hoping he'd perform last year. Last year, came into the season really excited about Sheldon Rankins, about the duo defensive tackle for the Jets, and it really did not pan out. This year, I think things are working much better. Rankins is playing well, I think. You have lots of players. Jermaine Johnson in a more limited role is playing well. John Franklin Myers, I think, is having an excellent season. You're getting a lot of quality from this Jets defensive line. Aaron Rodgers is a different challenge, though. And this Green Bay team does not have many great receiving threats, and I think it's clear that they've missed Devontae Adams this year. So I have confidence in the Jets corners, DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner, to deal with these Packers receivers. But Aaron Rodgers is always going to be a challenge. I know he's not playing well, but one of the issues I see is that we know the Jets, and I think they've done a better job this year. I think the defense has been less vanilla this year, but the Jets do what they do on defense. They don't throw a lot of wrinkles out there for the most part. Again, it's been more it's been more multiple this year, but the Jets, they don't throw a lot out there. So it's going to be interesting to see what Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich come up with, because they came up with a few different wrinkles last week. I mean, of course, there was the Sauce Gardner corner blitz on the first play, because Jets coaching staff also knows Mike McDaniel really well, the Dolphins head coach, because pretty much everybody coached together in San Francisco. They were all on Kyle Shanahan's staff in San Francisco. So I think you see that the Jets understand that they're going to need to mix things up a little bit. And part of that's true because Matt LaFleur, Robert Saleh, Mike LaFleur, these guys know each other so well. But it's also true because you got to mix your looks up with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, understands defensive concepts. He understands how to beat them. And if you throw the same look at him over and over, you're going to have trouble. So it'll be interesting to see what the Jets do. And of course, a lot of this comes down to pressure. For all the complaining about Robert Saleh's defensive scheme, the scheme works really well if you can generate pressure with your defensive line. And it seems to me like there's been less complaints about the scheme the last 2 weeks when the Jets have been able to get to the quarterback. And that's because, again, these defensive linemen are playing really solid football. Now, the other concern I have for this game is with Aaron Jones, because Aaron Jones is a tremendous back, and the Jets on the defensive side of the ball, they've been up and down against the run this year. I can't say they've been awful, because they've had some moments where they've been really good against the run, but there have also been some moments where they've been really bad against the run. And I think, C.J. Mosley's not playing well this year. Last year, C.J. Mosley was okay, and he got a lot of praise, he got a lot of credit. He was voted the team MVP. I don't think he played at the team MVP level. I don't think he was a weakness, though. This year, he's become a weakness. His game has declined this year, and I think at this point, you have to worry a little bit about him, especially going up against a back like an Aaron Jones, because he's not moving well. He's missing tackles. He's taking bad angles. It's C.J. Mosley just seems like he's kind of in decline, and he's a guy I look at as a potential weakness against this Green Bay rushing attack. So, even though the Packers don't have a ton of dynamic receivers, they have a couple areas where they can make you concerned for the Jets defense. And it's, the two big names, Aaron Rodgers, who not having a vintage Aaron Rodgers year, but still he's Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Jones, who, an excellent back, and you worry C.J. Mosley get one-on-one against him. A lot of this comes down to the defensive line, though. If they can control the point of attack, get pressure to Rodgers, and slow down Jones, penetrate, keep linemen occupied, then Jets have a shot to slow down this Green Bay offense, and they'll have a great shot at winning this game. And this is the type of game, if you want to be a team on the rise, you should find a way to win it. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. If you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening. You'll never miss an episode. You'll receive notifications as new episodes are posted. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give the episode a big thumbs up. Both of these help the channel out and help other Jets fans find the podcast. Have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy the game. We'll be back after the game to break down what happened.